The engine made the sound only once. A thin metallic cough. 3 uneven beats. Then silence. Clara Whitmore kept her hand wrapped around the brass ignition key long after the dashboard went dark. 6 mechanics had stood inside that garage over the past 14 months. 2 had come from specialty restoration shops. 1 had flown in from California after charging a fee Clara refused to repeat aloud. Every one of them had opened the hood, studied the records, replaced something expensive, and eventually given her a different version of the same answer. The car was too old, too altered, too temperamental, too far gone. But on a wet Thursday afternoon, a widowed father named Daniel Cross stood 20 feet away with rain dripping from his work jacket and said something no one else had said. "Don't start it again." Clara looked at him. He had not touched the car. He had not even opened the hood, and somehow he sounded afraid she might. What Clara could not have known was that Daniel had heard something in those 3 dying beats that would force both of them to confront the things they had spent years refusing to let go. If you've ever kept something because throwing it away felt too much like losing the person attached to it, tap like. And tell me in the comments what you would never be able to sell, no matter what someone offered you. Clara Whitmore did not invite strangers into the private garage. She barely invited people into the house. The Whitmore estate sat outside Asheville, North Carolina, beyond a stone wall lined with old magnolia trees and a gate that opened only after a camera had looked at you for several uncomfortable seconds. The garage stood apart from the main house. Not a shed, not a modern showroom. A brick building from another era, with tall windows, exposed beams, steel cabinets, and a concrete floor darkened by 50 years of oil stains that no amount of scrubbing had ever fully removed. Her father had preferred it that way. Malcolm Whitmore believed a clean garage was suspicious. "Means nobody's working," he used to say. He had been gone 3 years. Clara still heard him sometimes. Never in the house. Always here. His laugh seemed to live somewhere near the old workbench. His whistle belonged beneath the shelves, where dusty jars of screws and washers remained labeled in his square handwriting. Even the smell of machine oil and old leather carried something of him. That was why the car remained exactly where it had been when he died. A 1966 Whitmore Special. There was only one. Malcolm had built it when he was 27, long before Whitmore Precision became a national manufacturing company. Before the factories. Before the patents. Before magazine profiles started calling him a visionary. He had begun with a salvaged European chassis, an American V8, and a stack of ideas everyone around him considered impractical. He changed the suspension, reworked the cooling system, fabricated his own intake manifold, built several mechanical linkages by hand because the parts he wanted did not exist. Then he shaped an aluminum body over wooden forms with 2 friends in a rented workshop. The finished car was low and long, painted a dark silver that looked almost black in weak light. Malcolm called it Evelyn, Clara's mother's name. After Evelyn died, Malcolm stopped driving it. He still maintained it, still started it, still sat inside sometimes, but he never took it through the gates again. The last time Clara had heard Evelyn run properly was 2 weeks before her father's stroke. After his funeral, Clara had done what Clara always did when something hurt. She made a list. Estate documents, board notifications, insurance, staff, foundation, company transition, household accounts. The car went on the list too. Service Evelyn. Simple, manageable, a task. She had no idea that 14 months later the task would still be waiting. The first mechanic replaced the ignition components. The second blamed the fuel system. The third rebuilt part of the carburation setup her father had fabricated. The fourth insisted the compression readings meant the engine needed a complete rebuild. Clara authorized it. The engine came out, months passed. It returned with new seals, refreshed heads, polished hardware, and an invoice that could have paid for a small house. Evelyn ran for 11 minutes, then stopped. The fifth mechanic said the wiring harness was the problem. The sixth blamed modifications Malcolm had made decades ago without documenting them properly. The seventh was supposed to be Daniel Cross. Except Daniel did not belong on the list. Not according to Clara. She looked at the man standing near the open garage door. 37, according to the information her estate manager had provided. Tall without appearing imposing. Dark hair that needed cutting. Work boots worn pale at the toes. A gray button down beneath a faded Navy mechanic's jacket with cross motor service stitched over the chest. No polished diagnostic case. No assistant. No branded trailer. His pickup truck outside had primer on the rear quarter panel. Clara did not hide her disappointment. "You're Cross? Yes, you came alone. Yes, I was told there would be a specialist." Daniel glanced at the car. "Depends what you mean by specialist." Clara's mouth tightened. She had almost canceled when Margaret Ellis, her estate manager, told her the latest recommendation came from a small independent garage instead of a recognized restoration company. Margaret had insisted. Her cousin owned a delivery fleet. Cross had kept 3 of their older trucks running when a dealership had recommended replacing them. That was not the same as working on Evelyn. Not remotely. Clara turned the key once more in her fingers. Daniel noticed. "Please don't." She stopped. The words had not been rude, but they had been firm enough to irritate her. "You've been here for less than 2 minutes. I know. And you're already giving instructions. I heard it." "Heard what?" He looked toward the car. The way it died. Clara waited. Daniel said nothing else. She disliked people who used silence theatrically. "What did you hear?" "I don't know yet." "Then you heard nothing." "I heard enough to know I don't want you cranking it again until I've looked." Clara stared at him. Every expert before him had arrived eager to demonstrate confidence. This man looked almost reluctant to make a claim. That should have reassured her. Instead, it made her more suspicious. "You understand what this car is?" "An old car." Her expression changed. He saw it. "I know what you mean," Daniel added. "One-off body. Modified drivetrain. Hand-built systems. Your father changed half of it himself. More than half. Probably you researched it, I researched your father." That answer landed differently. Clara put the key on the workbench. The leather fob attached to it was blue once. Now it had faded almost gray. Malcolm had punched his initials into the back himself. M.W. Daniel glanced at it but did not touch it. Who worked on it last? Clara gave him the binder. It was 4 inches thick. Invoices, photographs, compression readings, parts lists, wiring diagrams, emails, handwritten notes from mechanics. Daniel opened it. He did not immediately start reading. Instead, he looked at the workbench, then at the shelves, then at the car, then back to the binder. "Your father kept records? For the company, obsessively for this? Where?" Clara pointed toward a row of metal cabinets. Daniel walked over. She watched him carefully. Most people entered the garage and went straight to Evelyn. They wanted to touch the car. Open things, crouch beside it, admire the bodywork. Daniel opened the first cabinet and studied the labels. Cooling, electrical, chassis, fuel, miscellaneous. The labels were in Malcolm's handwriting. Daniel smiled faintly. "What?" "Nothing," you smiled. "My dad labeled things like this." Clara said nothing. Daniel opened the electrical drawer. Inside were envelopes, old receipts, small sketches, and bundles of wire tied with string. He did not disturb them immediately. "You're a mechanic because of your father?" "My father was one." "Was?" "He died 11 years ago." There was no invitation in the answer. Clara respected that. Daniel spent the next 40 minutes looking. Mostly looking. He inspected the records. Knelt beside the car. Removed nothing. Touched almost nothing. At one point he leaned through the driver's window and studied the gauges without sitting down. Then he walked behind the vehicle and crouched near the exhaust. Clara's patience began to thin. Are you going to open the hood? Eventually, you've charged me for a diagnostic visit. I know. Most diagnostics involve diagnosing. He looked up at her. I'm trying to figure out what changed. The previous mechanics documented everything. They documented what they did. Yes, that's not always the same thing. Clara folded her arms. Daniel stood. Your father owned this car for 57 years. Yes, he built it. Yes, he probably knew every noise it made. Yes, then somebody who doesn't know the car has a disadvantage. Which would include you. Exactly. For the first time, Clara did not have an immediate response. Daniel looked toward the cabinets. So before I decide what's broken, I want to know what your father thought normal looked like. Clara's eyes went to the faded key. For 3 years, people had spoken about Malcolm as though death had transformed him into a symbol. Founder, industrialist, philanthropist, innovator. Nobody talked about the man who refused to throw away bent bolts because he might straighten them later. Nobody talked about the man who washed his hands with dish soap because he said mechanics cleaner smelled like regret. Daniel had been in the garage 45 minutes and somehow seemed more interested in Malcolm's habits than Malcolm's reputation. It unsettled her. He finally opened the hood. He stood over the engine for a long time. Malcolm's work lived everywhere. Custom brackets, hand-routed lines, machined housings, later additions layered over earlier solutions. Daniel traced none of them with his fingers. He followed them with his eyes. When he finally reached in, it was only to press lightly against one hose and then another. What do you think? Clara asked. I think 6 people have been fixing things. That is generally what mechanics do. He looked at her. I'm not convinced any of those things were the problem. Clara laughed once. There was no humor in it. Of course. Daniel straightened. You don't believe me. I believe you've been here an hour and saying the previous experts were wrong is an easy way to justify your own invoice. Fair. That stopped her again. No defensiveness. No sales pitch. Just fair. What now? I need time. How much? I don't know. I dislike that answer. I figured. Clara looked at the clock. I have a conference call in 20 minutes. Then I'll leave. She had expected him to argue. He closed the hood. Leave? I want copies of the records if you're comfortable giving them to me, especially anything handwritten by your father. I'll read them tonight. You're not taking originals. I wouldn't ask. And tomorrow, I come back. And then? I listened to it again. Clara's irritation returned. Mr. Cross, I can hire people who own equipment specifically designed to tell them what's happening inside an engine. I own equipment too. Then why aren't you using it? Because machines are good at measuring what's happening. He picked up his tool bag. They're not always good at telling you why. He left at 4:18. At 4:21, Clara told herself she would not bring him back. At 4:34, Margaret entered the study carrying the documents for Clara's board call. How did Mr. Cross do? He listened to the car for 3 seconds and spent an hour reading labels. Margaret blinked. That bad? He's either unusually thoughtful or completely incompetent. Which one? I don't know. Margaret almost smiled. Clara looked at her. Something amusing? It's been a while since you didn't know. Clara disliked that enough to change the subject. Whitmore Precision had problems larger than an old car. That was what Richard Voss reminded her the next morning. Richard had known Malcolm for 26 years. He had been chief financial officer before becoming chairman of the board. He was 62, silver-haired, precise, and so measured in his speech that even bad news sounded pre-approved. The Ohio contract is delayed again. Clara sat at the head of the conference table. How long? Minimum 6 weeks. That's unacceptable. To them or us. Both. Richard slid a report toward her. The issue isn't whether we can fulfill it. The issue is liquidity while we wait. We have the reserve. We have a reserve. Clara looked at the figures. The company was not collapsing. That would have been easier. Companies collapsing forced decisions. Whitmore Precision was doing something more exhausting. It was slowly losing ground. A major expansion Malcolm had begun before his death had cost more than forecast. 2 clients had delayed orders. Material costs had risen. A competitor was undercutting them on commercial contracts. Nothing fatal. Everything painful. Richard tapped another page. The board wants to reopen discussion of non-essential assets. No, I haven't said which assets. You don't have to. The house isn't company property. No, the foundation's collection is. No, Clara, the car is not being sold. Richard removed his glasses. This is precisely why we should discuss it. There's nothing to discuss. A private collector offered $2.4 million 18 months ago. I remember. A museum consortium may go higher. No, it does not run. That doesn't matter. His face softened. That was worse. When Richard became gentle, it meant he believed she had stopped being rational. Your father built a company employing 1,200 people. I'm aware. If he were sitting here, do you genuinely believe he would choose a machine and a garage over those employees? Clara's jaw tightened. That's manipulative. It's arithmetic. It's my decision. For now. Silence. Richard put his glasses back on. There it was. The actual threat. A shareholder proposal was already circulating. She knew it. Richard knew she knew it. Several directors wanted to separate the foundation's valuable historic assets from Clara's direct control, not because they hated Malcolm, because they believed Clara's attachment to him was interfering with business. The car had become Exhibit A. Richard gathered his papers. The Heritage Gala is 8 weeks away. I know. You plan to display Evelyn. I still do. As a non-running centerpiece? Clara said nothing. Richard stood. Fix it if you can. But after 14 months, I think we should consider the possibility that the car has already told you what it is. And what is that? Finished, Clara remained in the conference room after he left. She told herself she was angry because Richard had overstepped. It was only partly true. The rest was worse. Somewhere beneath her anger lived the possibility that he was right. At 3:10 that afternoon, Daniel returned. He was not alone. Clara saw the little girl through the garage window before Daniel had fully opened the door. She stopped walking. No. Daniel followed her gaze. The girl stood under the overhang beside his truck, wearing a red raincoat and holding a backpack to her chest. I know. No children. She won't come inside. That wasn't the point. My sitter had an emergency. Then you reschedule. I tried calling. I was in meetings. I know. Clara looked at him. I have rules. So do I. Her eyebrows lifted. Daniel's voice remained calm. My daughter doesn't stay alone. Not for work. Not for anyone. It was not a challenge. That made it harder to fight. She can sit in the truck? No. The house? With someone I don't know? Clara's expression cooled. Then this visit is over. Daniel nodded. All right. He turned. Again, no argument. No pleading. He simply chose the child. Something about the ease of it irritated Clara more than resistance would have. Wait. Daniel stopped. Clara looked through the window. The girl had crouched near a puddle and was moving a twig through the water as though conducting a scientific experiment. How old? 7? Name? Lucy? Does she touch things? Daniel looked toward his daughter. Constantly, that was not reassuring. It wasn't supposed to be. Clara exhaled. 20 feet from the car. I can do that. No food. Fine, no climbing. Obviously, no touching tools. Agreed. Clara pointed toward a wooden bench near the wall. She stays there. Daniel called Lucy inside. The girl entered as though she had been invited to a cathedral. Her eyes found the car immediately. Whoa, Clara flinched slightly. Lucy noticed her. Sorry, for what? My dad says whoa when something is really expensive. Daniel closed his eyes. I have never said that. You said it at the boat place. That boat was objectively expensive. Clara almost smiled. Almost, Lucy caught it anyway. Children saw things adults politely missed. She walked to the bench and sat. Her backpack remained on her lap. Daniel went to work. For the first hour, he asked for nothing. He connected instruments, checked readings, removed the air cleaner, studied the unusual fuel arrangement Malcolm had fabricated. Then he put everything back. Lucy read a book for exactly 11 minutes. Then she began drawing. Clara attempted to answer emails at a small desk in the corner. She told herself she was supervising. The truth was, she wanted to know what Daniel was doing. At one point, he asked her to start the engine. She moved into the driver's seat. The blue leather key fob fell against her fingers. "Once," Daniel said. She turned it. The starter engaged. The engine caught. For 3 seconds, Evelyn sounded almost alive. Then the uneven rhythm returned. Daniel raised one hand. Off, Clara killed the ignition. Daniel remained completely still. His eyes were closed. Clara noticed. "What are you doing?" "Listening to it disappear." "That makes no sense." "Probably not." He opened his eyes. Lucy spoke from the bench. "He does that." Clara glanced at her. "Does what?" "Closes his eyes when machines are being weird." Daniel looked over. "Thank you, technical consultant." Lucy continued drawing. "My grandpa taught him." Daniel's face changed, only slightly. Clara saw it because she had become skilled at noticing slight changes in men trying not to show emotion. "Your father?" Daniel nodded. "He ran a shop in Tennessee." "Was he good?" "The best I knew." "You said he died." "Cancer," the word landed without decoration. Clara looked at the engine. "Mine had a stroke." "I know. Of course you do." Daniel looked at her. "I read the article because I wanted to know when the car stopped being driven. Not because he had been researching her grief. Because he had been constructing a timeline. That distinction mattered." Clara turned the key fob over. M.W. Daniel went back to the engine. For 2 days he found nothing. On the third he found 3 things wrong. None was the thing. He repaired a deteriorated ground connection, corrected a linkage that had been adjusted too aggressively, found a tiny crack in an old vacuum line hidden beneath a custom bracket. Evelyn ran better. For 12 minutes. Then stopped. Clara leaned against the workbench. "So we've improved from 11 minutes to 12. Daniel wiped his hands. "Progress?" That sounded like sarcasm. It wasn't. "This is progress?" "Yes, the car still doesn't run." "But it died differently." Clara stared. Daniel seemed genuinely pleased. "You consider that good news?" "Very." "Why?" "Because the first problem is gone. And now? Now we find the next one." Clara shook her head. "You make failure sound almost productive." "It usually is." "You believe that?" "No." His answer surprised her. Daniel folded the shop cloth in his hands. "I think failure feels awful. I just think it sometimes leaves information behind." That evening, Clara remained in the garage after he left. She sat in the driver's seat. She did not turn the key. Instead, she looked through the windshield at the old workbench. She remembered being 9 years old and sitting on that bench while Malcolm worked. She remembered 12, handing him tools. 14, angry because he had missed a school concert for a factory emergency. 17, embarrassed when he arrived at graduation in grease-stained work pants. 22, finally understanding that he had built his entire life around showing up for things, even when he showed up imperfectly. 33, sitting beside his hospital bed as he tried to tell her something she could not understand. His speech had been damaged after the stroke. Most words came out distorted. He had looked at her with furious concentration. Car, key, drawer, she had understood those 3. Or thought she had. After he died, she searched the garage. The key was obvious. The drawer was not. There were dozens. She found nothing that seemed important. Eventually, the half-formed message became another thing she could not solve. Like Evelyn. Like Whitmore Precision. Like grief. The next Monday, Daniel arrived at 7:45. Clara was already in the garage. "You're early," he said. "So are you." "I'm working." "So am I." He glanced around. "At what?" She held up a small cardboard box. "I found these. Inside were notebooks. Not corporate records, not service invoices. Malcolm's notebooks." Daniel's expression changed. Where? In the house. Back of a cabinet. You've never seen them? Not these. Daniel took one only after she nodded. The pages were dense with measurements, sketches, short observations, and numbers. Not a diary. Malcolm would have hated diaries. But a mechanical notebook was close. Daniel read slowly. Clara watched him. What? Your father changed things constantly. I know. No, I mean constantly. He turned the book. A sketch showed a modified fuel return arrangement. Another page referenced heat behavior. Another described a strange intermittent pressure problem Malcolm had encountered decades earlier. Daniel read the line twice. What? He looked toward Evelyn. I need to check something. For the next 3 hours, he worked without conversation. At noon, Clara found him beneath the car with a light. At 1, he had removed a panel behind the rear compartment. At 2, parts sat organized on a cloth beside him. At 3, he stood and stretched his back. Well, I found something your previous mechanics missed. Clara's pulse quickened. The problem? A problem. She closed her eyes briefly. Daniel did not apologize. What? Your father routed part of the fuel return through a section nobody would expect unless they knew he'd done it. Why? He was fighting heat. Did it work? For 50 years. She looked toward the notebook. And now? There's deterioration where the line passes behind a shield. It may be pulling air when it gets hot. Maybe. Maybe. You enjoy that word. I enjoy not lying to customers. She gave him a look. He smiled. It was the first time she saw what Daniel Cross looked like when he was not tired. It changed him. Not dramatically. Just enough. There were lines around his eyes she had assumed came only from strain. Apparently some were from smiling. He repaired the damaged section. Evelyn ran for 29 minutes, then died. Clara did not speak. Daniel stood beside the car listening to the silence. Finally she said, You look happy again. 30 minutes is important. It was 29. 29 is important. Why? Because now it's heat-related. You already knew that. I suspected it. And now? Now I know. He looked at her. We're getting closer. Clara wanted to believe him. That was the problem. Hope was easy when nothing depended on it. Hope became dangerous when you had already been disappointed enough times to recognize the pattern. Richard called that evening. The museum increased its offer. No, 3 million. No, Clara. You've asked. I have an obligation to tell you. And I've answered. The shareholder meeting is in 5 weeks. I know. If the proposal passes, it won't. You don't know that. Clara stared through the study window toward the garage. A light remained on inside. Daniel had left 20 minutes earlier. Or she thought he had. She saw movement. Then Lucy appeared through the garage window carrying something. Clara frowned. I have to go. She ended the call. When she reached the garage, Daniel was kneeling beside the workbench while Lucy carefully placed small pieces of paper in a row. You left. Daniel looked up. Forgot my notebook. Clara looked at the paper. What is this? Lucy answered. Labels? For what? Mr. Whitmore's drawers. Daniel winced. I told her not to reorganize anything. I'm not reorganizing. Lucy pointed. I'm making a map. Clara looked at Daniel. She wanted to know why the drawers were confusing. They're not confusing. Lucy looked genuinely surprised. Yes, they are. Clara stared at her. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Lucy, what? They are. Clara should have been annoyed. Instead, she walked closer. Lucy had drawn the garage. Badly, but recognizably. Workbench, car cabinet shelves, each drawer had a number. What is that? Lucy pointed at a small square near the bottom, the drawer that doesn't open. Clara became still. What? Daniel followed her gaze. Lucy pointed toward the old workbench. The little one. Clara crossed the room. There were 8 shallow drawers beneath the bench top. She knew them all. Fasteners, measuring tools, electrical odds and ends, old receipts. The lowest right drawer had always been stuck. She crouched, pulled, Nothing. She had forgotten it was even a drawer. Her father's broken words returned. Car, key, drawer. Daniel saw her face. What is it? Help me, he knelt. The wood had swollen around the old metal runners. Daniel worked carefully. No crowbar. No force. He removed the drawer above it and reached down. Something clicked. The stuck drawer moved half an inch. Clara grabbed the handle. Together they pulled. Inside lay a handful of old shop items. 2 spark plugs, a worn folding knife, an envelope, and a small cassette recorder. Clara stopped breathing for a moment. The recorder was the size of her palm. Her father had used it when his hands were too dirty to write. She remembered him talking into it beneath cars. Measurements, ideas, reminders. She picked it up. The batteries had corroded. The cassette remained inside. Daniel said nothing. Lucy said nothing. For once. Clara held the recorder as though it might break from the weight of being recognized. The envelope beneath it had one word written across the front. Clara, her knees nearly gave. Not from weakness. From memory arriving too quickly. Malcolm's handwriting. Strong, blocky, alive. Daniel stood. I think we should go. Clara looked up. He nodded toward Lucy. We'll give you the room. She wanted to tell him he could stay. She did not. That night, Clara opened the envelope. There was no great confession, no final speech. Her father had probably written it years before the stroke. Maybe decades. It contained one sheet of paper. If you're reading this because Evelyn is giving you trouble, stop blaming the obvious things. She laughed, then covered her mouth. The sound became something else. She kept reading. I spent half my life learning that a machine can lie to your eyes. Something can look wrong and still be doing its job. Something can look perfect and be the reason nothing works. When you get stuck, stop looking. Listen, under that were several lines of technical shorthand Clara did not understand. At the bottom, and don't sell her to some rich idiot who will polish her more than he drives her. Love, Dad. Clara sat alone at the kitchen table until after midnight. The next morning she handed the letter to Daniel. He read it once, then again. His eyes paused on the technical notes. He knew. Knew what? I don't know yet. You just said he knew. He knew there was something deceptive about the fault. That is not the same as knowing the fault. No, he returned the paper. But this line matters. Which line? Stop looking. Listen. Daniel looked through the garage toward the car. My father used to say something similar. Clara folded the page carefully. What? Eyes are bullies. She stared at him. He shrugged. He had strange expressions. What did he mean? That once you see something that looks wrong, you start making every other piece of evidence fit it. Daniel walked toward Evelyn. You stop listening because your eyes already decided. Clara watched him. How did he teach you not to? Daniel did not answer immediately. Lucy did, from the bench. He blindfolded him. Clara turned. Daniel sighed. You really enjoy telling people my business. Lucy kept coloring. You told me stories. I told you stories privately. You never said they were secret. Clara looked back at Daniel. Your father blindfolded you. When I was 16. In a garage? Yes, that sounds irresponsible. It was. She waited. Daniel smiled faintly. He'd create small faults in engines. Nothing dangerous. Then cover my eyes and make me identify which system sounded wrong. Why? Because I was too confident. Were you good? I was 16. I was unbearable. That wasn't my question. Daniel looked at the car. Eventually, over the following week, he stopped making obvious progress. Clara watched him move backward through Evelyn's history. Old photographs showed him which parts Malcolm had relocated. Notebook entries revealed which changes had been temporary and which had become permanent. Daniel reconstructed the car in his head year by year. He found an old photograph of Malcolm beside the open hood in 1987. He stared at it for nearly 10 minutes. Clara noticed. What? Something's different. What? I don't know. She came beside him. The photograph showed Malcolm with his sleeves rolled high, one hand resting near the firewall. What do you see? Nothing. That's not reassuring. Daniel held the image beside a newer photo. There's a component here in the old picture that isn't in the later one. What component? I can't tell. He enlarged a scan. The image blurred. Could have been temporary. Or could have been replaced by something hidden. That word followed him for 3 days. Hidden, he listened to recordings from the old cassette once Clara had them professionally transferred. Most were exactly what she remembered. Malcolm talking to himself. Need 12 thousandths more clearance. Call Bennett about the gasket. Clara's birthday Friday, don't forget cake. That one made Clara close her eyes. Daniel pretended to be reading. Another recording mentioned Evelyn. High load hesitation is back, not ignition. Stop changing ignition parts, Malcolm, you idiot. Daniel laughed. Clara did too. It was the first time they laughed together. The sound felt disloyal for approximately half a second. Then it felt necessary. In the 3rd week of Daniel's work, Lucy began coming twice a week. Officially because childcare remained difficult. Unofficially because Clara stopped objecting. Lucy had rules. She followed approximately 80% of them. She did not touch the car without permission. She did not touch tools. She did, however, ask questions with the persistence of a federal investigator. Why is it named Evelyn? My mother. Was she pretty? Yes, prettier than you? Daniel nearly dropped a wrench. Clara looked at Lucy. According to my father, yes. Did that make you mad? No, would make me mad. Lucy. What? Clara surprised Daniel by saying, it made me mad when I was 6. Lucy nodded. See? Another afternoon, Clara found Lucy beneath the workbench. Not touching anything. Just lying on the floor looking upward. What are you doing? Thinking. Does thinking require lying on concrete? Sometimes. Clara crouched. What are you thinking about? Why grown-ups keep broken things? The question arrived without warning. Clara looked toward Daniel. He was outside taking a phone call. What broken things? Lucy pointed at the car. It's not broken permanently. You don't know. Clara felt the instinctive sting. Lucy did not notice. My dad keeps Mom's mug. Clara became quiet. Your mother? The yellow one. Lucy shifted on the floor. It has a crack. You can't drink from it because it leaks. Why does he keep it? He says because Mom picked it. Lucy frowned as though the answer remained incomplete. I asked why he doesn't fix the crack. He said some things aren't for fixing. Clara looked at her. And what do you think? Lucy considered. I think he doesn't want it fixed. Why? Because then it wouldn't be the mug she used. Something inside Clara moved. Children could be cruel accidentally. They could also be precise accidentally. She looked toward Evelyn. For 14 months she had told herself she wanted the car fixed because Malcolm would have wanted it running. Was that true? Or had failure become a way of keeping the last chapter open? If Evelyn ran again, then the task would be finished. If the task finished, the last thing her father asked her to do would become past tense. She stood. Daniel entered. You okay? Yes, he knew she was lying. He let her. That afternoon he discovered the first serious lead. It came from sound, not Evelyn's. A recording. Daniel had listened to one of Malcolm's old garage tapes 4 times. Clara finally asked why. There, what? He rewound. Malcolm's voice filled the speakers. Then behind it came the idle of Evelyn's engine. Steady, deep, mechanical. Daniel leaned close. You hear that faint pulse? No. It's underneath the exhaust. He played it again. Still no. That's good. How is my inability to hear something good? It means it's subtle. He played a current recording. Clara finally noticed the difference. The old recording had a soft rhythmic ticking buried beneath the idle. The current car did not. What is it? I think your father added a mechanical compensator somewhere in the system. You think? Yes. What does it compensate for? Heat, pressure, maybe both. Where is it? That's the problem. Daniel stared at the car. I have no idea. 2 days later, Richard arrived without warning. Daniel was halfway inside the passenger compartment, tracing a line behind the dashboard. Lucy sat at the workbench doing math homework. Richard stopped. Clara saw his expression. "This is the mechanic?" Daniel slid out. Daniel Cross. Richard looked at the stitched jacket. "Independent?" "Yes. How many classic restorations have you completed?" "Full restorations?" "Yes, 4. Richard glanced at Clara. 4. Daniel did not react. "How many one-off prototype vehicles?" "None." "How many museum-level cars?" "None." Richard turned toward Clara. "You dismissed Henley Restoration." They dismissed themselves after their third incorrect diagnosis and replaced them with a fleet mechanic. Daniel spoke. "I work on cars too." Richard looked at him. "I meant no insult." "You did." Richard blinked. Daniel returned to the dashboard. "But it's all right." Clara hid the beginning of a smile. Richard moved closer to her. The vote was scheduled. "When?" 3 weeks. "You said 5. It was moved." "By whom?" "Enough directors." Clara's face hardened. Richard lowered his voice. "Sell voluntarily, Clara, no. Then at least prepare yourself." "For what?" "For losing control of the decision." Lucy looked up from the workbench. Daniel continued working. But Clara could tell he heard every word. Richard glanced at Evelyn. $3 million for a car that doesn't run is not disrespect. You think this is about the money. I think everything eventually becomes about money when 1,200 salaries are involved. He left. The garage felt different afterward. Daniel did not ask. Clara almost resented him for it. Finally, she said, "The board can force the foundation to sell." Daniel kept working. "When?" 3 weeks. He stopped. "That matters." "Yes, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I hired you to repair a car, not manage my board. 3 weeks changes how I approach the work." "Can you fix it in 3 weeks?" Daniel looked at Evelyn. "I don't know." The words hit harder now. Clara turned away. "That answer is becoming expensive. I could give you a different one." "Would it be true?" "No," she nodded once. "Then don't." That was the evening something changed between them. Not romance. Not yet. Something quieter. Trust did not arrive as a feeling. It arrived as permission. Clara handed Daniel the only key to Evelyn. The faded blue tag rested in her palm. He looked down at it. "You sure?" "No," he waited. She closed his fingers around it. "Take the car apart if you need to." Daniel stared at her. Every mechanic before him had asked for broader authority. Clara had refused. Now she was offering it. "Not everything. Obviously not everything. Anything I remove gets photographed, tagged, and stored." "I know. No irreversible changes without approval. I know." "Then why are you looking at me like that?" Daniel closed his hand around the key. "Because this isn't about a car." Clara's expression sharpened. "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Turn me into a grief project." He held her gaze. "I wasn't. You were about to tell me what my father would want." "No, then what?" Daniel looked at the key. "I was going to tell you I understand what it costs to hand someone the last thing you have left of a person." Clara said nothing. Daniel placed the key carefully in his pocket. "My wife had a sewing box." Clara waited. Cheap wooden thing. One hinge broken. Nothing valuable inside. After she died, Lucy knocked it off a shelf. He swallowed once. The lid split. Clara could suddenly see the entire scene without him describing it. I yelled. "At Lucy?" She was 4. His shame appeared without self-pity. I yelled over a box. "What happened?" She cried. "I fixed it badly." Then I sat on the kitchen floor after she went to sleep and realized I wasn't angry about wood. Clara looked toward Lucy. She had headphones on now, humming softly over her homework. Daniel turned the blue leather key fob between his fingers. "I know this isn't about a car." He put it in his pocket. "And I know that doesn't mean the car doesn't matter." Clara's eyes burned. She hated crying. Not because it was weakness. Because once it began, she never knew which loss would come out first. She turned away before he could see. He let her. That was the kindness. The next 9 days became a campaign. Daniel closed his garage temporarily and brought most of his diagnostic equipment to the estate. Clara paid him enough to do it. He accepted only after calculating what he would lose in regular business. No inflated emergency fee. No percentage of the car's value. Just work. He removed interior panels. Traced old lines. Studied every custom mechanical system Malcolm had added. He found 2 undocumented changes. Neither solved the mystery. He rebuilt a small pressure regulator Malcolm had fabricated. The engine ran 43 minutes. Then died. The next day, 51. Then 27. The pattern made no sense. Daniel became quieter. Clara recognized the signs of obsession because she wore them herself. He forgot lunch. She began leaving food on the bench. He noticed, but did not mention it. He worked late. She remained nearby. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes neither said anything for hours. One night a storm rolled down from the mountains. Rain hammered the garage roof. The power flickered. Daniel sat on the concrete floor surrounded by photocopied notebook pages. Clara sat opposite him. "No mechanic could fix this," she said. "That's not helpful. I'm establishing precedent. You're establishing pressure." "Same thing." He rubbed his face. "Maybe I'm wrong. About?" "All of it." She looked at him. He rarely admitted uncertainty in that tone. Not practical uncertainty. Personal uncertainty. Maybe the old ticking isn't a compensator. Maybe it's where. Maybe I'm building a theory around noise, because I want your father's note to mean something mechanical. Clara looked at Malcolm's handwriting. "Stop looking. Listen. Why would you want that?" "Because then there's an answer." The rain filled the silence. Clara leaned back against a cabinet. "You like answers. So do you." "Yes, no," she looked at him. Daniel smiled weakly. "You like control. Answers are just one way you get it. That was uncalled for. Probably you're tired." "Definitely," she looked at the pages. "What do you like?" Daniel's expression changed. "What?" "If I like control, what do you like?" He thought. "Things that can be fixed." Clara looked toward the car. "And when they can't?" He did not answer. She understood anyway. His wife's cracked sewing box. Her father's car. Different objects. Same lie. If they could repair the thing, maybe some tiny piece of the person would stop being gone. The following morning brought the setback. Daniel started Evelyn at 8:12. The engine sounded better than Clara had ever heard it since Malcolm died. Smooth idle. Clean throttle response. Stable temperature. Daniel checked every reading. 20 minutes. 30, 40, 1 hour. Clara stood near the bench pretending not to watch the clock. 73 minutes. Daniel finally smiled. Not broadly, but enough. "Take it outside," Clara said. He looked at her. "Not yet." "Why?" "I want another stationary cycle." "You've run it longer than it has run in 3 years. That doesn't mean it's solved." Daniel, tomorrow, she hated patience precisely when patience was most necessary. Fine, at 81 minutes, Daniel heard something. His smile vanished. He moved toward the hood. A sharp mechanical noise broke through the engine. Then a second. "Kill it." Clara reached the key. Too late. The engine stopped violently. Not faded. Stopped. The silence afterward was enormous. Daniel opened the hood. Clara stayed in the driver's seat. She knew from his face. This was not the same problem. "What happened? Give me a minute. What happened?" "Clara, what happened?" He looked at her. Something failed. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. "You said it was improving." "It was." "You said the readings were good." "They were." "You said, I know what I said." He returned to the engine. Clara got out. "What broke?" "I don't know yet." "Of course." Daniel looked up. That one landed. She saw it. She did not stop. That's always the answer. Right now, yes, maybe Richard was right. Daniel went still. Clara kept going because anger was easier than fear. Maybe everyone was right. Henley, Cooper, the restoration shop in California. Maybe this thing cannot be repaired, and I've spent 14 months paying men to explain that in progressively more expensive ways. Daniel's face closed. That's possible. She wanted him to fight her. He did not. Then why are you here? Because you hired me to find out. You haven't. No, 3 weeks of exhaustion sat between them. Then Clara said the thing she would regret before the sentence finished. Maybe 4 restorations weren't enough. Daniel stared at her. She saw the exact moment he understood. Not criticism of the work. Of him. His little garage. His stitched jacket. His lack of pedigree. The same insult Richard had made. Only worse because it came from her. Daniel nodded. He packed his tools. Clara's anger disappeared. What are you doing? Going home. I didn't fire you. No, then stop. I'll come back tomorrow. His voice remained calm, too calm. I need to see my daughter. Daniel. He closed the tool bag. You're scared. Clara froze. I understand. Do not analyze me. I'm not. He lifted the bag. But don't make me small because you're scared. He left. Clara stood alone beside the dead car. At 7 that evening she went inside. At 8 she poured a glass of wine and did not drink it. At 9 she opened her father's letter. At 10 she called Daniel. He did not answer. She did not call again. The next morning he arrived at 7:53. Clara was waiting. I'm sorry. He stopped. No excuse, no explanation, just the words. Clara almost never apologized quickly. Her father had once told her she treated apologies like legal settlements. Daniel set down his bag. All right. No, not all right. He looked at her. I said what Richard said because I knew it would hurt. Daniel's eyes lowered briefly. That's true. I was afraid you had broken it. I might have. The answer made her breath catch. Daniel continued. That's part of why I left. You think you caused the failure. I don't know. Clara nearly laughed at the familiarity of the phrase. He noticed. So we're both having a difficult week. For the first time since yesterday, something softened. Together they inspected the damage. A small internal component in the valvetrain had failed. Not catastrophic, but serious. Worse, the failure might have happened because of years of inconsistent oil delivery through one modified passage. Another old problem. Another layer. Daniel sat on a stool. Clara stood near him. Can you repair it? Yes. How long? 4 or 5 days if I can get the part. The vote is in 8. I know. And the original problem? Still there. Clara closed her eyes. Daniel looked toward Evelyn. I think I need to stop trying to fix it. She opened her eyes. What? The original problem. That sentence requires explanation. I keep approaching it like a mechanic. You are a mechanic. Exactly, he stood. Your father wasn't. He built the car. He was an engineer who happened to be good with cars. He didn't think in repairs. He thought in systems. Daniel began gathering notebook pages. I keep asking which component is failing. What should you ask? What condition makes a component behave differently only after the whole system changes? Clara frowned. Heat? Heat, pressure, vibration, electrical load. Maybe something mechanical moving as the chassis warms. And your father already told us the clue. Stop looking. Listen. Daniel stared toward the car. I need every recording you have. For the next 2 days, he barely touched Evelyn. He listened. Old tapes. Home videos. A clip from a local television interview in which Malcolm started the car for a reporter. A family recording from Clara's 10th birthday where Evelyn could be heard idling in the driveway. Daniel extracted nothing digitally sophisticated. He simply listened. Again. Lucy came after school on the second day. She sat beside him. After 10 minutes, she removed one headphone. Why does Grandpa car sound like it's breathing? Daniel looked at her. What? The old one. Clara looked up from the workbench. Lucy replayed the recording. There, Daniel listened. The faint ticking. But Lucy had called it breathing, not ticking. Breathing, Daniel stood so quickly the chair rolled backward. What? Clara moved toward him. He played the sound. That's not a compensator. What is it? I think it's a valve. There are many valves in an engine, not engine valve. He grabbed Malcolm's notebook. Pages turned. Fast, then stopped. A sketch, almost meaningless, a small chamber connected to 2 lines with a spring notation. Daniel pointed. Here, Clara leaned closer. What am I looking at? Your father made a mechanical bleed valve. 4. Pressure equalization. Why? I don't know. Where is it? Daniel looked toward the car, then at the old photograph from 1987. The mystery component near the firewall. Present in one image, gone in another, not gone. Moved, hidden, Daniel walked around Evelyn slowly. He did not look under the hood. He looked at the body, at the firewall, at the passenger compartment, then at the floor. Your father moved it. Where? I think behind the firewall. You already checked. I checked the engine side. He opened the passenger door, removed a trim panel he had inspected before, then another. Behind it was metal, original looking, too original looking. Daniel ran his hand along an edge. Clara, she saw it. A seam, painted over decades ago. 4 hidden fasteners. 20 minutes later, Daniel removed the panel. Behind it sat a small cylindrical assembly no larger than a coffee mug. Hand-machined aluminum. 2 lines. A spring. A diaphragm housing. And stamped faintly on one side, MW887. Daniel laughed. Not because it was funny, because relief sometimes escaped through the wrong door. Clara covered her mouth. My God. Daniel touched nothing. For nearly a minute, they simply looked. The piece had been hidden for almost 40 years. Every restoration expert had studied the engine. Everyone had missed the system buried behind the interior firewall. Daniel found the old recording. Tick, 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 the valve cycling. He examined the current one. The internal diaphragm had hardened until it could barely move. When cold, it functioned just enough. As temperature and pressure changed, it stopped compensating. The engine starved unevenly. Mechanics saw the symptoms downstream. Ignition, fuel delivery, heat, timing. Each diagnosis looked plausible because each symptom was real. But the symptoms were not the cause. Clara stared at the little device. Can you repair it? Daniel's expression sobered. I think so. How long? The board vote is 5 days. I know. Daniel, I know. He removed the unit. It could not be replaced. No commercial part matched it. Malcolm had built it from scratch, so Daniel would have to do something he had avoided since he started. Recreate Malcolm's work, not restore it, not substitute a modern system. Build the missing heart of a dead man's idea without knowing every reason the man had designed it that way. Daniel did not sleep much for 3 nights. He measured every component, called a machinist he trusted, found a modern diaphragm material that could survive the operating environment without changing the mechanical behavior. Rebuilt the spring assembly. Made 2 versions. The first behaved incorrectly on the bench. The second was closer. Clara canceled meetings. Richard called 6 times. She answered twice. On the 4th day, the shareholder vote was scheduled for 10 the next morning. Daniel installed the rebuilt valve at 3:20 p.m. At 3:47, he asked Clara for the key. She handed it to him. He paused. You start it. Her fingers closed around the leather tag. She sat behind the wheel. Daniel stood beside the open door. Ready? No good. She looked at him. My father used to say you should be worried if you're not a little scared before something matters. Daniel smiled. Your father said a lot. He enjoyed hearing himself. Clara turned the key. Evelyn started. The engine settled into a low idle, and beneath it came a sound Clara had never consciously noticed until it had been absent. Tick, 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 breathing. Daniel closed his eyes. 30 seconds. 1 minute. 10, 30, an hour. The engine continued. 90 minutes. Still running. Daniel monitored temperature and pressure. Stable. 2 hours. Clara stopped pretending not to hope. At 2 hours and 14 minutes, Daniel shut the engine off himself. The sudden silence frightened her. Why? Because we test it again cold tomorrow. Tomorrow is the vote. I know. Then drive it. No. Her anger returned instantly. Daniel, one heat cycle isn't proof. You have $3 million and my father's legacy being voted on in less than 18 hours. And if I put you on the road tonight because we're emotional and something fails, none of that will matter. Clara looked at him. You are infuriating. I've heard. From whom? My daughter. Lucy, asleep on the old bench beneath Daniel's jacket, shifted without waking. Clara looked at her. Something in the sight dissolved the fight. She sat on a stool. What happens tomorrow? Cold start at 6. And if it runs, road test. And if that works, you go to your vote. With the car? No. She looked at him. Daniel smiled faintly. Unless you want to terrify your board. For the first time in days, Clara laughed. At 5:58 the next morning, the garage doors opened. Mist sat low over the lawn. Birds had barely begun. Clara stood beside Evelyn wearing clothes meant for a boardroom and shoes entirely unsuited to an old garage. Daniel arrived with 2 coffees. You drink it black, he said. She took the cup. You remembered. I fix things for a living. Memory helps. He checked the engine bay once, then held out his hand. Clara placed the key in it. No, Daniel looked at her. You, he gave it back. Clara entered the driver's seat. The leather tag rested against her fingers. MW. She turned the key. The engine started immediately. Steady, tick, tick, tick. Daniel watched the gauges. 10 minutes. 20. Ready? Clara looked at him. 4. Open the gate. Evelyn moved under her own power for the first time in 3 years. Daniel drove first. Slowly down the estate road. Through the gates. Clara sat beside him. Neither spoke. The car smelled of leather, hot metal, oil, and a faint trace of the cedar blocks Malcolm used to place beneath the seats during winter storage. They reached the road. Daniel accelerated gently. Evelyn responded. No hesitation. No stumble. The mountains rose blue beyond the trees. Clara put one hand against the dashboard. Her father had touched this exact surface thousands of times. She thought she would cry. She didn't. The emotion was too large for tears. They drove 4 miles. Turned around. Returned, Daniel parked in the garage. The engine idled. Tick, tick, tick. Clara looked at him. You did it. Daniel looked at the gauges. We did 1 road test. Daniel, his eyes met hers. She smiled. Fully, he had never seen it. For a second, she looked younger. Not childish. Unarmored, then Daniel heard it. A slight variation. Not failure, something else. He tilted his head. Clara saw his expression. What? Wait, he closed his eyes. The engine continued. Daniel listened. His eyebrows drew together. What is it? I don't know. The old dread returned instantly. He held up a finger, then smiled. Clara stared. What? It's fine. You just aged me 10 years. Sorry, what did you hear? The new valve is a little tight, meaning nothing dangerous, but I can tune it closer to your father's original behavior. Now? Daniel checked the time. 8:11. You need to leave in 20 minutes. Can it wait? Yes, Clara looked at the car. Then at him. I want it at the Heritage Gala tomorrow night. That gives me today. Yes. I thought the board was selling it. They haven't voted yet. Daniel smiled. No pressure. The board meeting began at 10. Richard sat 3 seats away. 12 directors attended. The proposal was simple. Authorize the foundation to liquidate selected non-essential heritage assets, beginning with the Whitmore Special. The arguments were predictable. Liquidity, fiduciary responsibility, market timing, governance. Clara listened. For the first time, she did not interrupt. When Richard finished, he looked at her. You have the floor. Clara closed the report. My father built Whitmore Precision with a belief that has become inconvenient. Silence. He believed some assets have value because they generate money. Others have value because they remind the people generating the money who they are. One director shifted. Clara continued. For 3 years I have treated those ideas as though they were mutually exclusive. Richard watched her. I've defended the Heritage Collection emotionally while running the company as though emotion had no place inside it. That was a mistake. She placed copies of a proposal on the table. Not a defense of the car. A plan. For months Clara had resisted selling Evelyn, but she had never articulated what keeping it was for. Daniel had forced her to. Not deliberately, by asking why. Whitmore Precision had a labor problem. Experienced toolmakers were aging out. Apprenticeship enrollment was weak. The company spent heavily recruiting skills it once developed internally. Malcolm had begun as a machinist. Clara proposed converting the unused East Annex of the oldest Whitmore plant into a paid heritage apprenticeship center. Modern manufacturing training. Mechanical restoration. Precision machining. Mentorship. Part of the Heritage Collection would rotate through the facility as teaching material, including Evelyn, not polished behind glass. Used, studied, driven, the program would be partially funded through the foundation, industry grants, and partnerships Clara had already begun contacting. Richard read in silence. Finally, he said, "When did you put this together?" "The last 48 hours. That explains the margins." A few directors smiled. Clara looked at him. "The car is not $3 million sitting idle." Richard studied her. "You're turning it into recruitment. Training, branding, partly, community outreach. Yes, your father would have liked the tax treatment." Clara almost laughed. Richard looked down at the proposal again, then at her. "Does it run?" Clara paused. "Yes, that changed the room more than it should have." Richard leaned back. "After 14 months. Yes, who fixed it? A mechanic." Richard's mouth moved slightly. "The fleet mechanic?" "The mechanic." The proposal to sell Evelyn failed. 7 votes to 5. Not overwhelming. "Enough," Richard approached Clara afterward. "I still think $3 million was a rational offer." "I know. And I still think you get sentimental about your father." "I do." He nodded. "That doesn't automatically make you wrong." Clara looked at him. Richard extended his hand. "What do you need for the apprenticeship plan?" She shook it. "Board cooperation." "That sounds expensive." "It will be." He sighed. "Your father would be enjoying this." "Watching you lose a vote?" "No," Richard smiled. "Watching you finally use sentiment as leverage." The Heritage Gala began the following evening at 6. Evelyn was supposed to arrive at 7. At 6:30, Daniel still had the hood open. Clara stood beside him in a black evening dress and heels. "You said it worked. It does. You have the expression you use when something doesn't. The valve needs one final adjustment. Then adjust it." "I am." Clara looked at the clock. Guests were already arriving at the museum wing downtown. Press had been invited. Several board members expected to see the car. Daniel listened. Adjusted, listened again. "No, what? I'm chasing it. What does that mean?" "It sounds right when I'm looking at the readings. Then wrong when I listen." Clara stared at him. Daniel stared at the engine. Then he laughed quietly. "What? Your father. What about him? Eyes are bullies." Clara understood before he said it. "No," Daniel looked at her. "You cannot be serious. I keep tuning to the gauge, which is normally considered useful, and every time I do I move away from the old recording." "Daniel," he walked to his tool chest. "I know how that valve is supposed to sound." "You think you know?" "Yes, based on a 50-year-old recording. Yes, recorded on a cassette machine. Yes, in a garage. Yes." Clara rubbed her forehead. "What are you about to do?" Daniel took out a clean black shop cloth. She stared at it. "No, your father told us. He said listen. He did not say blindfold yourself in formal wear 20 minutes before a gala. I'm not in formal wear." "That is what you took from that sentence?" Daniel folded the cloth lengthwise. Clara's disbelief became something almost like laughter. You actually did this as a teenager. A lot. And you believe you can tune my father's hand-built pressure system without looking. I believe looking is making me second-guess what I hear. This is insane. Possibly, Lucy appeared in the garage doorway wearing a blue dress and small white shoes. She was attending the gala with Daniel. She saw the cloth. Her face lit up. You're doing Grandpa's test. Clara turned. Do not encourage him. Lucy whispered to Clara, he's really good at it. That does not improve the situation. Daniel tied the cloth around his eyes. Clara watched him. The absurdity should have destroyed her confidence. Instead, she remembered Malcolm's letter. Something can look perfect and be the reason nothing works. Daniel held one hand near the hidden valve housing, not on moving components, just the panel beside it. He listened. The engine idled. Tick, tick. A pause. Tick, his head tilted. He made one small adjustment. Listened. Another then stopped. His hands moved with the memory of weeks spent inside the same few inches of machinery. No rush. No performance. Lucy became quiet. Clara became quiet. Daniel adjusted once more. The rhythm changed. Tick, 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 even Clara heard it. The old recording. Breathing. Daniel waited. 30 seconds. 1 minute. He removed the blindfold. He checked the gauges. Then looked at Clara. Now, she did not move. Now what? Drive it. 10 minutes later, Clara Whitmore entered the Heritage Gala behind the wheel of her father's car. Daniel sat beside her. Lucy was already at the venue with Margaret because Daniel had refused to let her ride in a car without modern rear restraints. The crowd heard Evelyn before they saw her. A low mechanical note rolled through the open loading entrance. People turned. Clara drove slowly into the exhibition hall. For the first time since Malcolm Whitmore had been alive, Evelyn moved beneath public lights. No tow platform, no trailer, no handlers pushing. Running, Richard Voss stood near the front. His mouth opened slightly. Clara enjoyed that more than she intended. She shut off the engine. The room applauded. Clara hated public sentiment. Usually, tonight she let it happen. Daniel opened his door. Before he could walk away, Clara caught his hand. He looked at her. Stay, I'm covered in grease. You're at a manufacturing gala. Good point. She did not release his hand immediately. Neither mentioned it. The apprenticeship announcement came 20 minutes later. Clara spoke from a small platform beside Evelyn. She talked about Malcolm, but not the founder people knew from articles. She talked about the machinist, the man who learned by getting things wrong, the man who hid handmade systems behind panels because there had been no proper place to put them, the man who believed knowledge mattered only if someone taught it to the next person. Then she introduced Daniel. He looked horrified. Clara almost smiled. Mr. Cross spent weeks solving a problem 6 specialists missed. Daniel stared at her from beside Lucy. He did not solve it because he had more expensive equipment. She glanced at him. He solved it because he was willing to admit what he didn't know, then listen long enough to learn. Applause. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Lucy clapped loud enough for 3 people. Clara continued. Whitmore Precision has spent years talking about a skilled labor shortage, as though skilled workers simply appear when companies need them. She looked around the room. My father would have called that lazy. A few older employees laughed. So we're going to start making them again. The first Whitmore Craft Fellowship would accept 20 apprentices. Paid from day one. No 4-year degree required. Training in machining, fabrication, diagnostics, restoration, and modern manufacturing systems. Daniel had not agreed to anything yet, which became obvious when Clara announced that Cross Motor Service would serve as an advisory partner. His eyebrows rose. She looked directly at him, assuming Mr. Cross negotiates a reasonable contract. The room laughed. Daniel shook his head, but he was smiling. Later, when most guests had moved toward dinner, Lucy stood beside Evelyn staring at her reflection in the bodywork. Clara joined her. Careful, I'm not touching. I know. Lucy looked up. Dad says your dad built this. He did. By himself? With friends. So he needed help. Clara considered. Yes, Lucy nodded as though this confirmed something important. Dad needs help too. Clara looked at her. With what? Everything, Lucy. Daniel's voice came from behind them. He approached carrying 3 glasses of water. Lucy ignored him. He forgets milk. I forgot milk once. Twice. Once in the last month. And he works when he's sad. Daniel became quiet. Clara did too. Lucy looked between them, then asked the question neither adult had prepared for. Are you going to be our friend after the car is done? The gala continued around them. Glasses, conversation, soft music. Daniel looked at Clara. Clara looked at Lucy. The easy answer would have been yes. Children accepted easy answers. Usually Clara crouched until they were closer to eye level. I hope so. Lucy frowned. Hope? Clara nodded. Some things take practice. Like engines? Apparently Lucy considered this. Dad says you're bossy. Daniel nearly choked on his water. I said decisive. You said bossy in the truck. Lucy, Clara stood. She was smiling. It's all right. She looked at Daniel. He's correct. That seems dangerous to admit. Don't get used to it. The weeks after the gala did not transform neatly. That was the part stories often lied about. Whitmore Precision still had cash flow pressure. The Ohio contract was still delayed. The apprenticeship program required legal approvals, insurance revisions, curriculum planning, equipment, and more money than Clara's original 48-hour proposal had anticipated. Daniel still owned a garage that needed him. Lucy still had school. Clara still worked too late. Daniel still disappeared into himself when grief surprised him. Neither became a different person because a car started running. But certain things shifted. Evelyn moved to the old Whitmore plant twice a week. Not permanently. Clara was not ready for permanently. Students came through the workshop while the training center was being prepared. Daniel taught a small group how to listen before reaching for instruments. He did not blindfold teenagers. Clara had made that a contractual condition. Lucy found this deeply disappointing. Richard became the apprenticeship program's most irritating supporter. He questioned every expense, then personally secured a supplier partnership that cut tooling costs almost in half. 3 months after the gala, the Ohio contract resumed. 4 months after that, Whitmore Precision won a new aerospace components order, partly because a client had seen national coverage of the apprenticeship program and wanted to work with a manufacturer investing in domestic skill development. Clara called the publicity accidental. Richard called that nonsense. Daniel called it useful. The business steadied, not magically. Gradually, which was the only kind of recovery Daniel trusted. He and Clara changed the same way. A dinner became 2. 2 became a Saturday at Lucy's school fair. Clara arrived wearing shoes completely inappropriate for grass. Lucy made her play a ring toss game. She lost. Badly, Clara accused the booth of being misaligned. Daniel told her she was a poor loser. She told him he was unemployed as her mechanic. He reminded her they had signed a 1-year advisory contract. She bought him a funnel cake. He considered the matter resolved. Another evening, they sat in the estate garage after Lucy had fallen asleep on a couch. Margaret moved there specifically because Lucy kept falling asleep on benches. Clara held her father's brass key. The blue leather tag had begun separating near the ring. I should replace this. Daniel looked at it. Do you want to? No, then don't. It will eventually break. Then reinforce the back. That changes it. A little. She looked at him. Is that your professional opinion? My professional opinion is that preserving something does not require freezing it. Clara turned the tag over. M.W. She thought about that. You're talking about us now. I was talking about leather. You're terrible at lying. I know. She looked toward Lucy, then back at him. I'm scared of this. Daniel did not ask what this meant. He knew. So am I. That's not particularly comforting. It's not supposed to be. What happens if it ends badly? It hurts. Clara looked at him sharply. That's your pitch? I don't have a pitch. He leaned against the workbench. My wife died. Your father died. Your mother died. We both spent years learning that loving something does not guarantee keeping it. Clara's expression softened. Daniel continued. I don't know how to promise you this won't hurt. Then what can you promise? He looked at Lucy, asleep across the garage. Then back at Clara, that I won't pretend not to care just because caring is risky. The room became very quiet. Clara looked down at the key, then placed it on the workbench. She crossed the small space between them. When she kissed him, it was not dramatic. No music changed, no applause waited outside the garage. Daniel touched her face carefully, as though he understood there were some things confidence could ruin. When they separated, Clara kept her forehead against his for a second. This doesn't mean you're right about everything. I would never assume. You frequently assume. Fair. She kissed him again. A year after Daniel first heard Evelyn die, the East Annex reopened. The sign outside read, Whitmore Craft Works underneath, smaller, in honor of Malcolm Whitmore and everyone who taught with their hands. The first class had 22 apprentices. Clara had approved 20. Richard found funding for 2 more and pretended the discrepancy was a clerical error. 8 were women. The oldest apprentice was 49. The youngest was 19. 3 came from families that had worked at Whitmore for generations. 7 had never held a manufacturing job. Daniel taught diagnostics 2 days a week. He hated classroom lectures, so he rarely gave them. Instead, he brought in machines with hidden faults. He let students struggle, let them misdiagnose, let them become certain. Then he asked the same question. What did you assume? Sometimes, if they became too confident, he reached for a black shop cloth. Clara banned that too. He ignored her once. She found out. There was a meeting. Lucy, now 8, found this hilarious. Evelyn remained in the center bay. Not as decoration, students maintained her, documented every system, digitized Malcolm's notebooks, mapped the hidden pressure valve so no future mechanic would spend 14 months discovering it again. Clara resisted that last part, not logically. Emotionally, some piece of her wanted the secret to remain Malcolm's. Then she remembered what the training center existed to do. Knowledge was not a shrine, it had to move, so she approved the documentation. On the first anniversary of the program, Clara drove Evelyn to the estate. Daniel followed in his truck with Lucy. The 3 of them spent the afternoon in the old garage. No event, no board, no cameras. Lucy sat on the floor labeling a school project. Daniel changed the oil. Clara went through one of her father's drawers. She found ordinary things. Washers, a pencil worn to 3 inches. A receipt from 1994. A photograph of herself at 12, asleep in the passenger seat of Evelyn while Malcolm drove. She had never seen it. For several minutes she stood completely still. Daniel noticed. He did not ask. Eventually she brought it to him. He wiped his hands before taking it. You looked happy. I was drooling. A little. Give that back. He smiled and handed it to her. Clara looked at the picture again. I spent 3 years thinking the car was the last thing he left me. Daniel leaned against the workbench. And? She looked around. The garage, the notebooks, the training program, the employees learning from work he began. Lucy humming over construction paper. Daniel standing in a place Clara once allowed no strangers to enter. No. She shook her head. It was just the thing I could see. Daniel said nothing. That was still one of his better qualities. Clara placed the photograph beside the brass key. The old blue leather tag was reinforced now. Daniel had added a thin backing piece without changing the worn front. Preserved, not frozen. Outside, evening settled across the property. Lucy looked up. Can we drive the old car? Clara glanced at Daniel. He shrugged, asked the owner. Lucy looked at Clara. Can we? Clara picked up the key. Yes, Lucy jumped up. Daniel pointed at her. Booster seat. I know. And no complaining. You complain more than me. Objectively false. Clara laughed as they walked toward the car. She opened the driver's door, then stopped. Daniel. He looked at her. You drive. His eyebrows rose. You sure? A year earlier, she would not even let another person carry the key out of the garage. Now she tossed it. Daniel caught it. The little blue tag swung once beneath his hand. M.W. He looked at Clara. She nodded. They drove through the gates as the last light disappeared behind the mountains. Evelyn's engine settled into the rhythm all three of them knew now. Deep exhaust, mechanical hum, and beneath it, almost too quiet to notice unless you knew to listen. Tick, 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 like breathing. The car had never really been the inheritance. Neither was the company. Not even Malcolm's notebooks. The inheritance was a way of meeting broken things without immediately deciding they were finished. It was knowing that expertise could become blindness when certainty arrived too early. It was learning that sometimes what looked ruined was only misunderstood. And sometimes the opposite was true. Something could look perfect while failing quietly behind the surface. Daniel had not rescued Clara. Clara had not rescued Daniel. Lucy had not magically healed two adults simply by being young enough to ask uncomfortable questions. That was never what happened. What happened was less dramatic and far more difficult. They stayed. Daniel stayed with a problem that made accomplished people walk away. Clara stayed with uncertainty long enough to trust someone who did not come wrapped in the credentials she expected. Lucy stayed exactly who she was, which forced the adults around her to answer questions they would have preferred avoiding. And eventually Clara understood why her father's note had mattered so much. Stop looking. Listen, he had written it about a machine. But Malcolm Whitmore had spent his life building things, and builders eventually discover that the same truth keeps appearing in different forms. People tell you what they need, not always with words. A daughter asks whether you will still be her friend when the work is finished. A widower keeps a cracked sewing box. A woman spends 3 years guarding a car because completing the final task her father left behind feels too much like saying goodbye. A mechanic hears 3 dying beats and refuses to turn the key again. None of it is rescue. It is attention. It is patience. It is refusing to decide that damage is the most interesting thing about someone. Months later, Clara placed her father's original letter in a frame inside the training center. She left out one line. The part about not selling the car to a rich idiot. Richard objected. He thought it was the best line. The rest remained. Something can look wrong and still be doing its job. Something can look perfect and be the reason nothing works. When you get stuck, stop looking. Listen, students pass those words every morning. Most assumed they were advice about machines. Daniel never corrected them. Some lessons worked better when people discovered the second meaning for themselves. And in the old garage outside Asheville, the brass ignition key still hung from the same hook where Malcolm had kept it. The leather was faded. The edges were worn. The initials remained. M.W. Only one thing had changed. Beside the hook was a small handwritten label Lucy had made. She had printed it in crooked black letters. Family car. Clara had noticed it months earlier. She never took it down.